When you think of the British royal family, what comes to mind? Glittering tiaras, horse-drawn carriages, and centuries of tradition wrapped in silk and ceremony. Well, what if I told you that beneath all that pomp and pageantry lies a web of secrets so dark, so carefully buried, that even mentioning them could shake the very foundations of the monarchy itself? Tonight, we're going to pull back the velvet curtain and expose 17 of the most shocking royal cover-ups in British history. These aren't your typical tabloid scandals about who wore what or who said what at a garden party. These are the stories critics have argued are sidelined, truths locked away in vaults, and the secrets that make the crown jewels look like costume jewellery in comparison. From vanished heirs and disputed bloodlines, to controversial wartime associations and financial practices that have raised serious questions, what you're about to explore challenges the carefully polished image of the House of Windsor. These long-debated historical controversies, legal grey areas, and moments that critics argue were deliberately kept out of public view. And here's what makes it unsettling. Every story on this list traces back to the same institution that presents itself as a symbol of duty, stability, and service. While the public sees tradition and ceremony, historians and journalists have spent decades uncovering a far more complicated reality. By the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why so many records remain sealed, why questions go unanswered, and why the line between history and secrecy is far thinner than most people realize. So, settle in, because this journey through royal secrecy is going to take us to places where even the bravest historians fear to tread. Let's begin with number 17, and I promise you, each revelation will be more disturbing than the last. Number 17, the monarchy's role in blocking freedom of information. Requests for an institution as high-profile as the British monarchy, one might assume that transparency is a core principle, especially when public funds are involved. Yet, over the years, the Crown has maintained a unique legal position that allows it to manage certain affairs away from the public eye. One of the most intriguing aspects of this arrangement is the monarchy's interaction with freedom of information requests, a tool designed to ensure accountability in public institutions. Under the UK's Freedom of Information Act, citizens can request access to official documents and communications. Most government departments are obligated to respond, providing insight into decision-making processes and public spending. However, when it comes to royal matters, the rules shift. Specific exemptions exist for communications relating to the sovereign, the heir, or other family members acting in official capacity. These exemptions are not just legal technicalities. They have repeatedly allowed the monarchy to block or delay disclosure of information, often sparking debate about the limits of public accountability. Over the years, multiple cases have highlighted the tension between transparency and royal privilege. Freedom of information requests regarding palace expenditures, official correspondence, and operational details have been refused, sometimes on the grounds that disclosure would prejudice the effective conduct of public affairs. In other instances, requests were delayed for months, even years, before a partial response was provided. These delays are typically legal and procedural, but they fuel speculation and curiosity among journalists, historians, and members of the public alike. What makes this particularly interesting is the delicate balance the monarchy seeks to maintain. On one hand, royal officials emphasize that exemptions exist to protect personal privacy, national security, or sensitive diplomatic communications. On the other, critics argue that too broad an interpretation can limit meaningful scrutiny of public expenditure or institutional practices. Freedom of information controversies often surface during high-profile events, such as major renovations to royal residences or expenses related to ceremonial duties. Each time, the debate is rekindled. How much transparency is too much, and how much secrecy is justified? Legal scholars note that the monarchy's freedom of information exemptions are somewhat unique, reflecting centuries of constitutional tradition. While the sovereign's private and official roles are distinct, their interactions with public institutions can make the line between private privilege and public interest difficult to navigate. This has led to repeated calls for clearer guidance on what information should be accessible and for whom, without compromising security or the ability of the Crown to perform its official duties. Ultimately, the story of freedom of information requests and the monarchy is a story about balance. It's about how an ancient institution adapts to modern demands for transparency while preserving the discretion that centuries of tradition have built. The delays, denials, and exemptions may never satisfy all critics, but they reveal a fascinating side of the monarchy, one that operates in the shadows of public curiosity, where history, law, and accountability intersect in ways few fully understand. Number 16. The secret royal archives and restricted access. Behind the ornate doors of Buckingham Palace and other royal residences lies a treasure trove of historical records, correspondence, and documents that chronicle centuries of British history. But not all of these archives are open to researchers, journalists, or the public. In fact, a significant portion of the royal records is restricted, sometimes indefinitely, sparking curiosity and speculation about what is deliberately kept from view. Officially, the royal archives exist to preserve documents and artifacts relating to the monarchy, its official duties, and its historical legacy. They house personal letters from monarchs, diplomatic correspondence, state papers, and records of decisions that shaped the nation. Access is tightly controlled. Scholars must apply for permission, justify their research, and agree to strict handling and usage rules. Even then, approval is selective, and many requests are delayed or denied without detailed explanation. While security and preservation concerns are cited as reasons for restricted access, the pattern of denials often fuels speculation that certain documents might be sensitive in nature. Correspondence involving controversial political decisions, sensitive financial arrangements, or interactions with foreign leaders frequently falls into this category. Some historians argue that by limiting access, the monarchy could control the narrative of history, ensuring that only carefully curated perspectives reach the public. Legal frameworks in the UK provide some oversight but are limited in scope when it comes to the monarchy. Unlike government archives, which are subject to public record laws, the royal archives operate under a unique set of rules established by the sovereign. Documents relating to official state matters may eventually be released after a set period, but those deemed personal or sensitive can remain classified indefinitely. This discretionary power effectively gives the royal household the ability to manage its historical legacy on its own terms. High-profile examples of restricted archives have occasionally made headlines. Requests to access correspondence relating to royal involvement in political decisions during crises, or financial arrangements tied to estates and trusts, have been repeatedly denied. While the denials are legal and procedural, they underscore the opaque nature of royal documentation. Each refusal, in turn, becomes a source of intrigue and discussion, leading to theories about the extent of the monarchy's involvement in matters of governance, diplomacy, or financial oversight. The secrecy surrounding the archives also raises broader questions about transparency and historical accountability. Critics argue that access limitations can hinder historical research and public understanding, while defenders maintain that privacy, security, and preservation are legitimate concerns. The tension between public curiosity and institutional discretion has persisted for decades, making the royal archives a focal point for debates about how much of the past should be open for scrutiny. Ultimately, the restricted nature of these archives reminds us that the monarchy is not just a ceremonial institution. It is a custodian of history, wielding discretion over what is remembered and what remains hidden. Every denied request, every delayed approval adds to the mystique, illustrating how power and secrecy can shape not only the present, but also the historical record for generations to come. Number 15. The royal family's influence over intelligence operations. The British monarchy is often seen as a ceremonial institution, appearing at state events, charity functions, and public celebrations. Yet behind the scenes, the royal family has historically maintained close ties with the nation's intelligence community, exerting subtle, but significant, influence over operations that are usually considered the domain of government agencies alone. These connections have roots in the early 20th century, when the monarchy's access to privileged information and global networks made them a valuable asset for British intelligence. Monarchs and senior royals were regularly briefed on political developments, espionage activities, and international conflicts, giving them insight into matters that extended far beyond their ceremonial duties. While much of this collaboration has been described as advisory, there are documented cases where royal input shaped intelligence priorities, staffing decisions, and operational focus. Perhaps the most notable example involves sensitive diplomatic communications during the Cold War. Declassified documents reveal that senior palace officials received intelligence briefings on espionage activity in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. In some cases, the palace was able to recommend courses of action, such as surveillance priorities or the vetting of key personnel, that were incorporated into operational planning. These recommendations were framed as protecting the national interest, but they also had the effect of protecting the monarchy's own security and reputation. In addition, the monarchy's influence extended to requests for information and intervention in intelligence matters. There are instances where palace officials sought clarification, updates, or action regarding threats perceived to target the royal household, whether in Britain or overseas. While these requests were often formally routed through government channels, insiders note that the monarchy's position carried implicit weight, creating pressure on agencies to respond quickly and discreetly. Some historians argue that this level of involvement blurs the lines between ceremonial duties and covert influence. While the monarchy does not engage directly in operations, its access to intelligence and ability to guide focus on particular threats demonstrates a behind-the-scenes role that few outside the corridors of power fully appreciate. Critics point out that such influence, while legal, raises questions about accountability and transparency. Unlike elected officials, the royal family is not subject to parliamentary oversight, meaning that any input they provide to intelligence operations occurs with minimal external scrutiny. The secrecy surrounding this influence has also fueled speculation. Questions about what the monarchy knew, when they knew it, and how their guidance shaped decisions during crises remain difficult to answer fully. Yet, it is clear, the royal household has maintained a privileged position within Britain's security apparatus, leveraging its historic authority and relationships to protect both national interests and its own institutional standing. In essence, the monarchy's connection to intelligence operations illustrates how soft power can operate behind closed doors. Publicly, the crown symbolizes tradition and continuity. Privately, it has maintained channels of influence capable of shaping outcomes in ways that rarely reach public awareness. This duality, ceremonial visibility paired with strategic discretion, remains a defining feature of the royal institution's enduring power. Number 14. The monarchy and government censorship of historical documents. The British monarchy is often portrayed as a symbol of tradition, continuity, and national pride. Yet behind the grandeur of state ceremonies and public appearances lies a history of selective control over historical records, particularly documents that could shed unflattering light on royal actions or political influence. For decades, the palace has worked closely with government officials to ensure that sensitive materials remain classified, heavily redacted, or entirely inaccessible to the public. One of the most significant mechanisms for controlling access is the use of exemptions under the Public Records Act and related legislation. These exemptions allow documents to be withheld from public scrutiny if their release is deemed harmful to national security, international relations, or the interests of the Crown. While such protections are intended to safeguard legitimate state secrets, They have also been applied in cases where the material primarily concerns royal finances, personal correspondence, or politically sensitive interactions between the monarchy and government ministers. A prominent example involves correspondence between the monarch and successive prime ministers during periods of national crisis. Letters and memos that discuss royal opinions on government policy, military decisions, or foreign affairs are often withheld for decades, sometimes exceeding the usual closure period. In certain instances, historians and journalists who submit Freedom of Information requests for these materials have faced repeated delays, denials, or heavily redacted responses. Critics argue that this creates an uneven historical record, making it difficult to fully understand the monarchy's role in shaping modern British politics. In addition to document control, there is evidence that the palace has worked to influence government archival practices. Archivists who handle sensitive royal materials are required to follow strict guidelines for classification, preservation, and release. Leaked reports indicate that instructions often come directly from senior palace officials, specifying which files may never be released and which can be delayed. These measures, while legal under current frameworks, give the monarchy extraordinary influence over how history is recorded and accessed. The implications extend beyond academic curiosity. Restricting access to historical records can shape public perception of the monarchy, limit scrutiny of political decisions, and shield controversial actions from accountability. By controlling what is known and when, the royal household is able to maintain its image as a stable and neutral institution, even when its involvement in sensitive political or financial matters may have been significant. While some argue that this level of control is justified to protect national stability, others see it as a form of institutional self-preservation. The monarchy's ability to influence which historical narratives are preserved and which are hidden underscores its enduring power behind the scenes. Public ceremonies may celebrate continuity and tradition, but the selective release of documents reminds us that much of the monarchy's story remains untold, carefully curated to protect its reputation. Number 13. The royal household and the secret use of private security firms. When we think of royal security, images of the Queen's Guard standing stoically outside Buckingham Palace usually come to mind. However, beyond the ceremonial uniforms lies a highly sophisticated network of private security contractors employed by the royal household. While the public is assured that security is handled by official government forces, a closer look reveals that the monarchy has long relied on private firms for operations that are intentionally kept off the record. These firms are not only responsible for protecting royal residences and high-profile events, they are also tasked with intelligence gathering, risk assessment, and discreet surveillance of individuals who may pose reputational or security threats. This includes journalists, activists, and even government officials whose actions could embarrass or challenge the monarchy. While this level of precaution might seem reasonable in a high-profile role, it becomes concerning when paired with a lack of transparency and oversight. Internal memos and whistleblower accounts suggest that private security teams have coordinated with palace officials to prevent leaks of sensitive information. In some cases, personnel from these firms have been used to monitor former staff members who attempted to publish memoirs or disclose internal operations. Legal agreements often include strict non-disclosure clauses, and failure to comply can result in immediate termination, legal action, or the use of additional legal pressure to protect the monarchy's secrets. Moreover, contracts for these services are often awarded without public tender, meaning taxpayers may indirectly fund operations with limited accountability. Payments for these private security services are frequently included in broader categories of palace expenditures that lack detailed breakdowns, making it difficult to determine the scale or scope of these programs. While the government's official stance emphasizes the necessity of protecting the royal family, the opacity of these arrangements allows for potential misuse or overreach. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of this cover-up is the careful cultivation of secrecy. Private firms are selected not only for their expertise, but for their ability to operate discreetly and maintain complete confidentiality. Security personnel are often sworn to secrecy under contracts with terms that can outlast their employment by decades. This creates a parallel network of control and surveillance that operates beyond the reach of parliamentary oversight. Critics argue that this secrecy shields the monarchy from accountability and allows it to manage its public image without scrutiny. While these private security measures are presented as essential for safety, they also provide the royal household with tools to suppress information, influence media narratives, and monitor potential critics. In essence, the use of private security firms illustrates how the monarchy maintains control, not just over physical spaces, but over information, perception, and influence. Even as the royal family continues to emphasize transparency and modernity in public relations campaigns, the existence of these covert arrangements reminds us that the House of Windsor still wields considerable behind-the-scenes power that remains largely hidden from public view. Number 12. The royal family and undisclosed property deals. When most people think of the royal family's wealth, they imagine palaces, estates, and the crown jewels. But beyond these visible assets lies a complex web of property holdings, some of which have been bought, sold, or leased in ways that remain largely hidden from public scrutiny. Over the years, freedom of information requests and investigative journalism have uncovered repeated instances where property transactions connected to the monarchy were shielded from disclosure, raising questions about transparency and accountability. These undisclosed deals often involve high-value estates, urban properties, or commercial real estate leased to private businesses. While some of these transactions are facilitated through the Crown Estate, a public body accountable to Parliament, others are handled through private trusts, shell companies, or foundations closely tied to the royal household. This allows the family to operate in a grey area where oversight is minimal, and details about tenants, terms, and revenue streams remain largely confidential. Investigations by journalists and researchers have revealed that, in some cases, properties owned by royal trusts were leased to major corporations or foreign investors under agreements that included clauses designed to prevent disclosure. These clauses effectively block researchers, journalists, or even government bodies from obtaining meaningful information about who benefits financially or how the properties are used. While there is no suggestion of illegal activity, the lack of transparency fuels public skepticism and questions about fairness. What makes this cover-up particularly notable is how the royal household has responded to attempts at transparency. In multiple cases, formal requests to access records through freedom of information laws were either denied or delayed under exemptions that claim national security or privacy concerns. Legal experts have noted that these exemptions, while legitimate in certain circumstances, have occasionally been applied broadly, creating a protective shield around property dealings that would otherwise be subject to public scrutiny. The strategic management of property interests also allows the monarchy to generate revenue discreetly. Profits from rentals or leases are often reinvested through trusts or used to fund private projects without the need for parliamentary approval. This level of control over assets ensures that the royal family maintains financial flexibility while minimizing external oversight. Critics argue that these undisclosed property deals reflect a broader pattern of opacity within the monarchy. While public-facing initiatives emphasize philanthropy and transparency, the reality is that significant portions of the royal household's financial and real estate operations remain inaccessible to the public. This selective disclosure allows the family to protect sensitive information, safeguard investments, and maintain influence in both domestic and international contexts without scrutiny. In a world where transparency and accountability are increasingly demanded from public institutions, these hidden property dealings serve as a reminder that the monarchy continues to operate in a space where secrecy is not just tolerated, it is carefully cultivated. The royal family's approach to property highlights how influence and financial power can coexist behind a veil of discretion, even in a modern constitutional monarchy. Number 11. The royal family and diplomatic immunity loopholes. The British royal family is often described as a symbol of diplomacy, representing the United Kingdom on state visits, hosting foreign leaders, and fostering international relationships. But beneath this ceremonial role lies a lesser-known aspect of royal life: the use of diplomatic immunity and illegal loopholes that, in some cases, have shielded members of the monarchy or associated staff from scrutiny and accountability. Diplomatic immunity is typically reserved for accredited diplomats and their families, designed to allow officials to perform their duties without fear of legal harassment in foreign countries. However, there have been repeated reports that the royal household has, at times, leveraged similar protections to avoid disclosure or legal responsibility in both international and domestic contexts. This doesn't mean that the monarchy has engaged in illegal activity, but it has used legal grey areas to maintain privacy and operational discretion. One notable example involves royal staff travelling overseas on behalf of the monarchy. In some cases, questions raised by local authorities or journalists regarding property holdings, official expenses, or sensitive negotiations were met with claims of diplomatic privilege. While these claims are legally complex, they effectively prevent external oversight and create layers of secrecy around royal actions abroad. Closer to home, there have also been instances where financial arrangements or contracts connected to royal interests were structured to exploit legal exemptions tied to diplomatic and sovereign immunity. Government reports and investigative journalism have revealed that the royal household has sometimes argued that certain communications, agreements, or financial transactions fall outside the reach of public records laws because they involve sovereign functions. This has resulted in delayed or denied freedom of information requests and limited transparency in matters that affect public interest. Experts note that these practices serve multiple purposes. They protect the monarchy's privacy, prevent sensitive financial or political information from becoming public, and allow the royal household to operate efficiently on both national and international levels. However, critics argue that these loopholes also create a system in which the monarchy is insulated from accountability in ways that other public institutions are not, fueling perceptions of privilege and inequality. Despite ongoing scrutiny, there is little public record of reforms that fully address these loopholes. Parliamentary committees, independent journalists, and legal experts have repeatedly called for more consistent application of transparency rules to the royal household, especially regarding overseas dealings and financial arrangements. Yet, the combination of legal protections, tradition, and the monarchy's symbolic authority ensures that full accountability remains elusive. Ultimately, the royal family's use of diplomatic immunity and legal loopholes highlights the delicate balance between ceremonial privilege and public responsibility. While the monarchy serves as a unifying figure and international ambassador, these hidden mechanisms reveal how royal discretion can sometimes prioritize protection over transparency, shaping public perception and reinforcing the aura of untouchability that surrounds one of the world's most enduring institutions. Number 10. The royal family and controversial land acquisitions. The British royal family is one of the largest landowners in the world, with estates that span millions of acres across the United Kingdom. While much of this property is well known, the grounds of Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and the Sandringham Estate, less publicised are the methods and circumstances by which certain lands were acquired, often sparking controversy and secrecy. Many of the monarchy's holdings have historical roots stretching back centuries, but there are instances in the 20th and 21st centuries where acquisitions have raised questions about transparency and fairness. In particular, parcels of land purchased or transferred under private deals, some involving minimal public oversight, have sparked concern among historians, landowners, and journalists. These properties, while legally acquired, often bypassed standard procedures, leaving local communities unaware of transactions until they were finalised. In several cases, freedom of information requests related to land acquisitions by the Crown Estate or privately held royal properties were delayed, denied, or partially redacted under special exemptions. Government officials have argued that these exemptions exist to protect national security, private negotiations, or sensitive financial data, but critics contend that the lack of transparency prevents public understanding of how significant land transfers are executed and who benefits from them. One notable example involves the Duchy of Cornwall, the estate that provides income to the heir to the throne. Over the years, portions of farmland, woodland, and coastal areas have been bought and sold through complex arrangements with private developers, charitable trusts, and local councils. While legal, these deals have occasionally drawn scrutiny for their opacity, particularly when local residents or competing bidders were left uninformed until decisions were completed. Another area of contention has been urban land development. Royal-owned properties in London and other cities have been leased or sold for commercial development, sometimes with restrictions or agreements that prevent full disclosure of the terms. While these arrangements support investment and generate revenue for the Crown, they also highlight the privileged position the monarchy holds in negotiating outside normal public procedures. Experts emphasise that this approach is not illegal. The monarchy operates under a combination of historical privileges and modern legal frameworks that allow for discretion in property matters. However, the repeated use of exemptions and non-disclosure measures has fostered public debate about the balance between royal privacy and accountability, particularly when such decisions intersect with community interests and national resources. Ultimately, the royal family's handling of land acquisitions illustrates the tension between tradition, legal privilege, and transparency. While these estates are a source of national pride and historical significance, the secrecy surrounding some acquisitions has fueled ongoing scrutiny. Understanding these practices sheds light on how the monarchy manages vast wealth and resources while remaining largely insulated from public oversight, reinforcing the perception of a carefully guarded institution operating beyond the reach of conventional accountability. Number 9. The monarchy's influence on government appointments. One of the lesser-known aspects of the British monarchy is the subtle but enduring influence it has historically wielded over government appointments. While modern constitutional conventions limit the monarch from overtly directing political outcomes, historical patterns, and carefully exercised discretion have allowed the Crown to shape the composition of ministers, advisors, and other high-level positions in ways that often remain invisible to the public. Throughout the 20th century, there have been several instances where the royal family reportedly expressed preferences or concerns regarding who should occupy key government roles. These interventions were usually framed as private discussions with prime ministers or senior officials relying on centuries of institutional knowledge and personal networks, rather than formal authority. In many cases, these conversations left no official record, making it difficult for historians to verify the extent of royal influence. Researchers and journalists have noted that freedom of information requests seeking documentation about the monarchy's involvement in such appointments are frequently denied or heavily redacted. Government officials often cite the same exemptions applied to sensitive royal matters, national security, constitutional convention, or personal privacy to withhold correspondence or meeting records. The result is a persistent opacity surrounding the true scope of royal engagement in political decision-making. A notable example comes from the mid-20th century, during transitions between prime ministers in periods of minority government. Anecdotal evidence suggests that monarchs would provide informal guidance about the political viability of potential cabinet members, focusing on candidates' reputations, personal reliability, and perceived loyalty to the Crown. While not legally binding, these recommendations carried weight, influencing appointments and shaping policy priorities indirectly. Even in contemporary times, While the monarch's role is largely ceremonial, there are subtle signals that continue to influence appointments at the highest levels. Advisors close to the royal household sometimes facilitate introductions or provide confidential assessments of candidates for ceremonial positions, ambassadorships, or advisory boards, ensuring that individuals aligned with the Crown's interests maintain positions of prominence. Again, these activities remain largely undocumented in public records, leading to questions about accountability and transparency. Critics argue that while the monarchy is constitutionally neutral, the combination of informal influence, discretion, and non-disclosure creates a shadow channel of power. This channel allows the royal family to indirectly shape governance without facing the scrutiny applied to elected officials, highlighting the delicate balance between ceremonial duty and behind-the-scenes influence. Ultimately, the monarchy's involvement in government appointments demonstrates the complex interplay between tradition, protocol, and political practice. It's a reminder that, despite the outward appearance of neutrality, centuries-old conventions and carefully maintained discretion allow the Crown to exert a form of soft power that is subtle, often invisible, and deeply rooted in the United Kingdom's constitutional framework. Number 8. The royal family and sensitive intelligence operations. The British monarchy has historically maintained a close, albeit largely hidden, relationship with national intelligence agencies. While the Queen and other senior royals are constitutionally neutral and ceremonial in their public duties, private communications and classified briefings have shown that the royal household has occasionally been privy to highly sensitive intelligence operations, sometimes influencing decisions about what information is shared with government officials or the public. One of the most notable areas of concern is the control over information regarding covert operations that touch on national security, diplomacy, or foreign relations. Historically, Freedom of Information, FOI, requests that could shed light on the royal family's involvement in these matters are routinely delayed, heavily redacted, or outright denied. The exemptions cited often include national security or royal privacy, effectively shielding the monarchy from scrutiny while keeping critical details classified. During the Cold War, for instance, senior royals were regularly briefed on intelligence assessments concerning potential threats to the United Kingdom. Some archival documents suggest that they were informed not just of immediate threats, but also of long-term strategic considerations, including espionage networks, sensitive diplomatic negotiations, and intelligence failures that could have impacted both domestic security and foreign policy. While these briefings were intended for situational awareness, they also created opportunities for informal influence over decisions about disclosure, risk mitigation, and public messaging. In recent decades, similar practices appear to continue, albeit under modern frameworks of oversight and constitutional norms. For example, classified correspondence obtained through historical research indicates that palace officials were occasionally consulted on how certain intelligence operations could impact the monarchy's public image. By weighing reputational risks alongside security risks, the royal household indirectly shaped what information reached ministers, journalists, and, in some cases, even parliamentary committees. Critics argue that this dual role, being both informed on intelligence matters and able to influence disclosure, creates a unique channel of soft power. While no constitutional authority permits the monarchy to direct intelligence operations, the combination of access, discretion, and historical precedent allows for subtle, behind-the-scenes impact on how sensitive matters are handled. FOI request patterns reinforce this concern. Requests for documents related to the monarchy's interactions with intelligence agencies are often met with claims of exemption for national security or royal confidentiality, even when the events in question occurred decades ago. This has led historians and investigative journalists to speculate about the breadth of royal awareness and involvement in clandestine activities that remain undisclosed to the public. Ultimately, the royal family's connection with intelligence operations illustrates how ceremonial power can intersect with classified information, It highlights the tension between transparency and tradition in a constitutional monarchy and underscores the ongoing challenge of fully understanding the monarchy's behind-the-scenes influence on matters of national and international importance. Number 7. The royal influence on diplomatic appointments. While the British monarchy is officially a ceremonial institution, historical and contemporary records reveal that the royal family has occasionally exerted subtle influence over diplomatic appointments and postings. This influence rarely appears in official government documents, partly because it falls within the unwritten conventions of a constitutional monarchy, but it has nonetheless shaped key decisions that impact both domestic governance and international relations. The process of appointing ambassadors, high commissioners, and senior diplomats is officially managed by the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. However, there are numerous instances where senior royals, particularly the monarch and the Prince of Wales, have been briefed on the suitability of candidates and have provided informal guidance. While this guidance is technically advisory, its weight can be significant due to the prestige and constitutional authority the monarchy holds in government circles. Internal correspondence and historical archives show that palace officials sometimes flagged potential appointees who could either enhance or pose reputational risks to the crown. For example, diplomats who had controversial political leanings, personal scandals, or conflicts of interest were occasionally flagged for reconsideration. Similarly, individuals with established connections to charitable or commercial interests associated with the royal family sometimes received favourable consideration, subtly shaping diplomatic careers in ways that were never publicly disclosed. Freedom of information, FOI, requests related to these interactions are often denied, citing exemptions such as ministerial communications or royal confidentiality. These denials are not necessarily evidence of wrongdoing, but they do demonstrate how the royal household can act as a gatekeeper for information that might otherwise inform public debate. Researchers and investigative journalists who attempt to trace the monarchy's influence on diplomatic decisions frequently encounter heavily redacted files or delayed responses, highlighting the challenge of establishing transparency in this area. This influence has occasionally extended beyond individual appointments. There is evidence to suggest that senior royals have been consulted on broader foreign policy strategies, particularly when diplomatic relations intersect with national ceremonial events, trade delegations, or charitable initiatives that carry international visibility. By providing input on these matters, the monarchy can indirectly affect who is sent to key postings and how foreign governments are engaged. Critics argue that even subtle influence over diplomatic appointments raises questions about accountability, given the monarchy's unelected status. Supporters counter that the advisory role is traditional, discreet, and non-binding, providing a stabilizing element to the continuity of British foreign relations. Regardless of perspective, it is clear that the royal family occupies a unique space between ceremonial symbolism and practical influence, a space that occasionally intersects with formal government decision-making. The pattern of blocked or delayed FOI requests, along with archival evidence of behind-the-scenes advice, paints a nuanced picture. While the monarchy does not hold direct political power, it maintains the ability to quietly shape the careers of senior diplomats, affecting not only the individuals involved, but also the broader course of British foreign policy over decades. Number 6. The secret role in military operations approval. While the British monarchy is largely ceremonial in modern governance, the royal family retains constitutional responsibilities that include the formal approval of military actions. In practice, this is largely symbolic, as operational decisions are made by the government. However, historical and contemporary evidence shows that the monarchy has occasionally exercised influence, directly or indirectly, over how military operations are presented, justified, or even delayed, particularly during sensitive conflicts where public perception matters. One key example involves the process of authorizing overseas deployments. While the Prime Minister and Cabinet are legally responsible for military decisions, the sovereign formally gives the royal assent to orders or parliamentary approvals relating to armed forces. In highly sensitive situations, palace officials have provided input on the timing and framing of these decisions, ensuring that any deployment aligns with the monarchy's public image. This is often coordinated through private correspondence and briefings between the monarch's advisors and senior government officials. Documents and memoirs from former military officers indicate that palace input has occasionally influenced the communication of military decisions. For instance, briefing notes prepared for ministers sometimes included recommendations on minimizing negative press coverage or emphasizing the humanitarian aspects of operations, reflecting the monarchy's concern with public perception. In some cases, FOI requests related to these communications have been denied or heavily redacted, citing exemptions for national security or royal privacy, making it difficult to trace the full scope of involvement. There are also instances where ceremonial oversight intersected with operational planning. Royal attendance at troop inspections, overseas visits to active deployments, or participation in commemorative events has sometimes been coordinated to coincide with political decisions or military announcements. While these actions are ostensibly symbolic, they serve as a form of soft influence, subtly shaping the narrative around military engagement and bolstering public support for government decisions. Critics argue that any unelected influence over military operations, however informal, raises questions about transparency and accountability. The fact that FOI requests related to these matters are routinely denied can fuel public speculation, even if no direct interference occurred. Supporters maintain that the monarchy's role is strictly advisory and ceremonial, emphasizing continuity and national morale rather than operational command. Despite the lack of formal power, the royal family's historical and ongoing involvement highlights the delicate balance between ceremonial duty and practical influence. By shaping how military actions are presented and perceived, the monarchy can indirectly affect public opinion and, in some cases, governmental decision-making, all while remaining within the bounds of constitutional convention. In essence, the monarchy's involvement in military operations demonstrates the subtle ways an ostensibly symbolic institution can influence national security matters, particularly in areas where secrecy, timing, and public perception intersect. This delicate dance between ceremony and influence has persisted for decades, revealing a layer of royal involvement that remains largely hidden from public scrutiny. Number 5. The royal influence on diplomatic negotiations. The British monarchy is often seen as a symbol of tradition, pageantry, and continuity, but beyond the pomp lies a subtle, long-standing influence on diplomatic affairs. While the government officially conducts foreign policy, historical evidence shows that the royal family has occasionally played a behind-the-scenes role in shaping negotiations, particularly when matters of national prestige or Commonwealth relations are involved. One notable example is the monarch's involvement in state visits and treaty ceremonies. While these events are largely ceremonial, private meetings between the sovereign and visiting leaders often provide opportunities for informal discussion. Palace aides and advisors prepare briefings, highlighting sensitive topics, cultural nuances, and potential areas of compromise, subtly guiding visiting dignitaries' perceptions of the United Kingdom. These exchanges can influence the tone and outcome of negotiations without leaving a formal record. There have also been cases where the monarchy intervened to slow or reshape diplomatic communications. Internal government correspondence obtained through declassified archives shows that palace officials occasionally reviewed drafts of sensitive communiques, offering input on language that could be perceived as overly aggressive or potentially damaging to bilateral relations. In some instances, this input resulted in delays to the release of statements or modifications to the wording, ensuring that the monarchy's image of impartiality and dignity was preserved. Freedom of information requests related to these interactions are frequently denied under exemptions for national security or royal privacy. While this makes it challenging to determine the full extent of involvement, historians and diplomats have documented anecdotal instances, suggesting that the palace played a discrete role in shaping outcomes during negotiations concerning Commonwealth countries, trade agreements, and ceremonial recognition of newly independent states. The monarchy's influence is not about policy-making in the conventional sense, but about soft power, the ability to shape perception, maintain national prestige, and provide reassurance to foreign leaders. For example, the Queen's meetings with heads of state during the Cold War helped establish personal rapport and foster trust, even when official policies were determined by Parliament. These personal interactions could help smooth tensions, create goodwill, or facilitate compromise in otherwise contentious discussions. Critics argue that any unelected involvement in diplomacy, even informal, raises concerns about transparency. The fact that FOI requests on royal communications are regularly refused fuels public speculation about the monarchy's behind-the-scenes impact. Supporters, however, contend that these interventions are strictly advisory, aimed at preserving the nation's image and ensuring smooth international relations rather than dictating policy outcomes. Ultimately, the royal family's discreet involvement in diplomatic negotiations illustrates the nuanced ways in which a ceremonial institution can wield influence. Through careful management of appearances, private discussions with visiting leaders, and advisory input, the monarchy has quietly shaped Britain's global interactions for decades, without ever overtly stepping into the realm of political authority. Number 4. The royal family's influence on security services. For decades, the British monarchy has maintained a close relationship with the nation's security services, including MI5 and the police, to ensure the safety of the royal family. While personal protection is entirely expected, there have been instances where royal influence appears to have extended beyond standard security protocols, shaping investigations, surveillance, and the handling of sensitive information. Internal memos and historical records suggest that concerns raised by palace officials about potential threats to the monarchy have occasionally resulted in the diversion of intelligence resources. FOI requests related to MI5 activities concerning the royal family are frequently denied or heavily redacted, citing national security exemptions. While these denials are legally justified, they obscure the extent to which royal priorities may have influenced operational decisions within the security services. One notable area of concern has been the monitoring of protest groups and political activists. Historical documents indicate that, in certain cases, individuals seen as disruptive to royal events or public appearances were placed under surveillance, not purely as a matter of public safety, but also to preempt any embarrassment to the monarchy. Requests to access records of these actions have repeatedly been blocked, leaving little clarity for journalists, academics, or the public. The palace has also been linked to shaping the security landscape around high-profile events. During state visits, jubilees, and royal weddings, coordination between royal security teams and government agencies is extensive, sometimes resulting in temporary restrictions on public access, curfews, or monitoring of communications. While these measures are often framed as standard protective procedures, leaked correspondences show that palace officials occasionally requested expanded measures, effectively influencing government security decisions without public accountability. The secrecy surrounding these arrangements is reinforced by the Official Secrets Act, which places legal limitations on disclosing intelligence activities. Combined with the monarchy's position as a symbol of national heritage, this has created a system where FOI requests about royal security are systematically denied, citing potential threats to national safety. As a result, the public rarely gains insight into the scope of influence the royal family may exert over intelligence priorities. It is crucial to note that none of this indicates illegal activity. The royal family has a legitimate right to protection, and the security services operate within legal frameworks. However, the recurring denial of information requests, the redaction of sensitive details, and the strategic management of intelligence suggest that royal influence over security matters is both extensive and carefully shielded from public scrutiny. In essence, the monarchy's role in influencing security services highlights a subtle but significant form of power. By ensuring that requests for information are blocked or delayed and that intelligence resources prioritize royal concerns, the Crown maintains not just physical safety, but also an operational advantage in shaping which threats are visible to the public and which remain hidden behind layers of secrecy. Number 3. The monarchy and secret diplomatic communications. Behind the public image of the British royal family as ceremonial figureheads lies a long history of discreet diplomatic involvement. While the monarchy is constitutionally bound to remain politically neutral, declassified documents and historical correspondence suggest that monarchs and senior royal advisors have occasionally influenced diplomatic negotiations, often without public knowledge or parliamentary oversight. Throughout the 20th century, the royal family maintained private lines of communication with foreign leaders, including heads of state, ambassadors, and intelligence officials. These communications, often routed through private secretaries or trusted couriers, were intended to offer advice or express the Crown's perspective on international matters. While there is nothing inherently illegal about diplomatic correspondence, the secrecy surrounding these exchanges has occasionally raised concerns about transparency and accountability. In some cases, these private communications appear to have subtly guided British foreign policy. For example, during periods of international tension, palace officials reportedly provided assessments or recommendations to government ministers, influencing the tone and timing of diplomatic initiatives. FOI requests related to these communications are routinely denied, with exemptions citing national security or the monarch's constitutional role. The result is that historians and the public often have limited access to the full extent of the monarchy's involvement. One notable example occurred during the Suez Crisis in 1956. Letters between the Queen and senior officials suggest that the royal family was closely monitoring events and, according to some leaked accounts, quietly encouraging specific diplomatic strategies to stabilize the situation. Similarly, during the Cold War, private correspondence between the palace and British ambassadors in Moscow indicated that the monarchy was concerned about protecting national interests while maintaining the Crown's international reputation. FOI requests related to these communications remain heavily restricted. The secrecy is reinforced by a combination of constitutional convention and the Official Secrets Act. By controlling access to sensitive communications, the royal family has maintained a behind-the-scenes influence without formal accountability. While the public sees official government statements and policy decisions, the private influence of the monarchy often remains invisible, leaving room for speculation about the degree to which royal advice has shaped diplomatic outcomes. Importantly, these actions do not suggest overt political interference. Instead, they highlight the subtle power of the monarchy in leveraging personal relationships, trust, and historical prestige to influence discussions and decisions at the highest levels of government. By keeping these communications shielded from scrutiny, the Crown ensures that its influence is quietly effective while maintaining the appearance of political neutrality. In short, the monarchy's role in secret diplomatic communications illustrates the intersection of tradition, discretion, and influence. While the royal family may not wield legislative power, their access to sensitive international channels allows them to quietly shape perceptions, guide discussions, and safeguard national and royal interests, often in ways the public will never see. Number 2. The royal family and the Prince Philip papers. For decades, the inner workings of the British royal family have been closely guarded, with access to certain private records restricted even to historians. One notable example involves the private papers of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. These documents, covering correspondence, diaries, and personal notes, have long been shielded from public access, with the palace citing privacy, constitutional conventions, and national security as reasons for withholding them. The Prince Philip Papers reportedly contain insights into the Duke's personal views on political matters, international relations, and even social controversies. While the monarchy is meant to remain politically neutral, historians believe these papers reveal instances where the Duke may have offered private opinions or advice on government policies, sometimes influencing the course of events behind the scenes. FOI requests or academic inquiries seeking access to these documents are routinely denied or heavily delayed, citing exemptions designed to protect the sovereign and their immediate family from scrutiny. The secrecy surrounding these papers has prompted debates over transparency and the public's right to understand the role of the monarchy in modern governance. Scholars suggest that the documents could provide important context about historical decisions, diplomatic stances, and the dynamics between the Crown and elected officials. However, the palace maintains that the Duke's papers are private, emphasizing that public knowledge of their contents could compromise personal privacy and ongoing diplomatic relationships. Historically, similar patterns of restricted access have existed with other royal archives, including correspondence from Queen Elizabeth II's early reign. The decision to shield these records reflects a broader strategy of controlling the narrative around the monarchy, ensuring that private opinions or sensitive discussions do not create controversy or undermine public confidence in the institution. Interestingly, some leaked excerpts over the years have shown that Prince Philip held strong and sometimes controversial opinions on a range of topics, from environmental concerns to global political events. These glimpses suggest that, while the monarchy operates within ceremonial bounds, individual members can exercise subtle influence through private channels. By keeping the full records inaccessible, the royal family retains the ability to shape historical interpretation and public understanding of their actions. Ultimately, the Prince Philip Papers highlight a recurring theme in the monarchy's approach to secrecy: the balance between public transparency and private discretion. While the institution maintains that its primary role is symbolic, the careful protection of these documents shows that personal influence, strategic communication, and behind-the-scenes advice have been a quietly significant part of the royal family's impact on the UK and beyond. By controlling access to these papers, the monarchy ensures that their legacy, decisions, and influence remain curated, leaving historians and the public with only a partial view of events that could otherwise shed light on the personal role of the royal family in shaping modern Britain. Number 1. The monarchy and secret influence over government policy. For centuries, the British monarchy has been celebrated as a ceremonial institution, symbolizing stability, tradition, and continuity. But behind this public image lies a carefully maintained system of influence that has quietly shaped government decisions and policy, sometimes in ways the public never sees. While the monarch is constitutionally expected to remain politically neutral, historical records and expert accounts suggest that private conversations, letters, and confidential briefings have occasionally allowed royal input to sway key government actions. Prime ministers have routinely met with the sovereign in private, providing advice and updates, but historians note that these meetings sometimes extended beyond ceremonial discussion, offering subtle direction on political matters. The shocking aspect is not that the monarch engages with leaders, that is expected, but rather the scope and secrecy of this influence. Certain policy decisions, from military commitments to major economic strategies, appear to have been shaped in part by behind-the-scenes guidance from Buckingham Palace. Because these discussions are undocumented in public records and protected by constitutional convention, the public cannot fully scrutinize the role of the monarchy in shaping the nation's direction. In addition to influencing domestic policy, the monarchy has also maintained confidential channels with foreign governments, often through envoys, private letters, or intermediaries. Some historians argue that this hidden diplomacy has impacted international negotiations, trade agreements, and defense decisions, creating a level of influence far beyond what is acknowledged publicly. The secrecy surrounding these activities has fueled speculation, sometimes exaggerated, but always rooted in the undeniable fact that the monarchy operates with privileges that place it above normal governmental oversight. What makes this cover-up particularly controversial is that it sits at the intersection of tradition, law, and modern democracy. While the monarch cannot pass legislation or veto policy, private advice and persuasion, kept entirely out of public view, represent a form of power that is unprecedented in modern democratic societies. Citizens can vote for parliament, but they have no way of knowing if the monarchy's confidential perspectives are subtly shaping those policies before they even reach debate. The monarchy has defended these practices as part of its duty to serve the nation responsibly, emphasizing discretion, continuity, and experience. However, critics argue that a secretive influence over elected officials, even if guided by good intentions, raises profound questions about transparency, accountability, and the balance of power in a democracy. Ultimately, this cover-up reveals the most enduring and controversial secret of all. The monarchy, often portrayed as a symbolic observer of government, may wield invisible power that shapes Britain's past, present, and future. It is a reminder that in the corridors of Buckingham Palace, influence, quiet, unseen, and unrecorded, can be just as powerful as any public decree. As we wrap up, remember that the monarchy has maintained many secrets over the centuries, some surprising and little known. While they continue their public duties, much of what happens behind the scenes remains hidden from the public eye. History is full of intrigue, and the stories we've explored tonight are just the beginning of uncovering how this centuries-old institution has shaped the nation.